Hello, so today I'm just going to share a few more thoughts about the story that I talked about last week, and also some thoughts that connect to that from two other stories that I've been teaching this week. So last week I talked about the story of Jonathan, when Jonathan had a daring plan to go fight the Philistines. So if you don't know the story, it's in 1 Samuel 14, and I also talked a bit about it in my last video, but I'm not going to explain the whole story all over again. But I've just been thinking a lot about this story. It just really strikes me how, like, the disadvantages Jonathan and Saul and the Israelites had. Like, they only had 2 sharp swords, and they had such a small group of soldiers, and they had this huge, overwhelming army. And I can relate to that because I get overwhelmed very easily. But we can get overwhelmed maybe by all we have to do, all our responsibilities. For me, I feel like I have the disadvantage of not much time. I feel like there's so much I need to do, and yet I don't always feel like I have enough time. And so many different things pop up when you're already busy, which makes you even more busy. And I guess there's so many things I want to do as well, and yet I feel like I don't have the time. So yeah, I could feel like Jonathan, and yet with Jonathan, one of the things he did, like he decided he was going to go up to the Philistines because he believed that God would be able to help them. But he did have, he made sure that God was with him. Like he said, you know, we're going to go so where they can see us. He said to his armor bearer, and if they say, come on up, then we'll know, you know, that God is helping us and will help us win. But if they don't say that, then we know, then we won't go up and fight. And it's good for us, especially with whatever it is that overwhelms us. It's not always things we have to do, but it's good to make sure that what we are doing is what God wants us to do, because we can't trust in God to help us do something that has not come from Him, that's not His plan for us. So we need to be prayerful about the things that we do and make sure it is what God wants us to do. But if we know that it is, then we can trust in God to help us, and we can be courageous like Jonathan was. But I just think it's so neat that they won with only 2 swords and such a small group of people. It just shows how great God is, and that when we trust in Him, He can make a little go a really long way. And on Wednesday I taught the story of the 5 loaves and the 2 fish. And it's just that same thing again, God taking something so little, so pathetic, and using it to feed such an overwhelming crowd of people. Only God can do that, and yet we just have to give what we have to God and trust Him to do that. And one thing that stood out to me in that story, when I was preparing that story for preschool, it says, they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments and of the fishes, and that's Mark 6 verse 43. And the word fragments, I always thought of that just meaning is like, you know, the leftovers, what was left over, but fragments actually means broken pieces. And I thought that was quite neat. It reminded me of a quote I read the other day. But you know, with things that are broken, we think, oh, we throw away things that are broken. But in God's eyes, we are most useful when we are broken. And broken means smashed or shattered. So, yeah, we may have a broken heart, broken dreams, broken expectations. Our life might feel like it's broken, it's not going the way we thought. We may have broken health, broken possessions, and that we, lost our possessions or whatever. Broken finances. Broken hope, broken family or marriage, broken friendships or relationships, or a broken spirit. But I just want to read this quote that I read the other day from Oswald Chambers in My Utmost for His Highest. So this is just part of the meditation. It says, why shouldn't we go through heartbreaks? Through these doorways, God is opening up ways of fellowship with His Son. Most of us fall and collapse at the first grip of pain. We sit down on the threshold of God's purpose and die away of self-pity, and all so-called Christian sympathy will aid us to our deathbed. But God will not. He comes with a grip of the pierced hand of His Son and says, enter into fellowship with me, arise and shine. If through a broken heart God can bring his purposes to pass in the world, then thank him for breaking your heart. So, in God's eyes, we're most useful when we are broken. But in that story, the bread was broken in Jesus' hands. And if our life is in God's hands, if we are living in God's will and have surrendered everything to him, then we are broken in the hands that heal. There's a Bible verse in Psalms that says he heals the brokenhearted. Or he heals the broken in heart and bindeth up their wounds. So if we want to be useful, then God will break us in some way, but he will also heal us as well. And then today I was supposed to be teaching the story of David and Goliath, which is the same thing again, something so big and God using something so small. So I was reading that story this morning. I didn't actually teach it today because Joseph was feeling unwell this morning, so I'll probably teach it tomorrow if he's better again. One thing that stood out to me in this story though, but yeah, it's the same thing again like the other two stories. Let's see. So it says, so David has gone down to the army camp, and then Goliath came out. And it says, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. So anyway, and then it comes when David goes to fight him. It says, and it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. So with God's strength and with God's help, he was able to run towards Goliath, whereas everybody else was running in the opposite direction. But when he trusted in God, God gave him that courage and that strength and that help to run towards him. And yet he's so dependent on God. Like when you read what he says, he's not trusting in himself. It's all about God and about God's glory. And he said, this day will the Lord deliver thee into my hand. And then he says, but later on, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. So he was able to fight Goliath because he was trusting in God, and he was concerned about God's glory, not about himself. And then verse 50, this is chapter 17 of 1 Samuel. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David. So in this story, he didn't have any sword at all. He just used the little weapons that he had. So those are kind of three stories that all are similar and that I can relate to in different ways. But yeah, when we trust in God and give what we have to him, he can do so much.